The meeting is going to be recorded and live streamed. I would ask that slight technical glitch. Okay.
Apologies.
That's all right. Okay, so the meeting is live streamed by HTC. Members and officers must use the desk microphones. In order for this to work, only 2 microphones in addition to the chairs could be on at the same time. Mobile phones, please turn them off. Fire exit is over there and over there. The meeting point is at the top of the end of Mill Hill car park, as we know. Can I ask the working group members and officers to introduce themselves? I'm Councillor David Page and chair of this group. I am a member for Logan Ward.
Hello, I'm Leah Mickleborough. I'm the Head of Democratic Services, Elections and Monitoring Officer.
Good evening, I'm Sarah Hamilton, Democratic Services Officer.
Amanda Nunn, Councillor for Bosworth Ward.
Councillor Dr. Paul Bremner, Councillor for Logan Ward.
Councillor Darren Woodywest, Councillor for Welland Ward.
Councillor Phil Knowles, Great Baden and Ardman.
I'm Jo McAvoy, Land Charges and Elections Team Leader.
Sheena Mortimer, Electoral Services Manager.
Lovely, thank you. We have apologies for absence from Councillor Joe Asher. Are there any declarations of members' interests? None? Okay. We've got the draft minute of the Committee Governance Review Working Group of the 27th of the 4th, taking them as read. Any comments? Will I ask for approval then, in which case? Councillor Woodybus, seconded by Councillor Nunn. Thank you. So a week ago today, the outcome of the local poll. Leah Mickleborough, Head of Democratic Services, Elections and Monitoring Officer, will introduce a report which updates members on the outcome of the non-binding local poll, as I said, which took place on the 30th of June. The recommendations from that are that the Community Governance Review Working Group note the outcomes of the non-binding local poll. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I think hopefully this report is largely self-explanatory and it's just updating you with the outcomes. I was actually, one of the big surprises to me in this was how consistent everything was. So remember from our last meeting, 84% of the consultation respondents were in favour of a new council, 86% in the poll. There was no variances really between the wards. Everything was within 2%. The turnout was within 2%. I've rarely seen an election result quite so consistent. And one other little factor just to update you on, because we're always mindful to such things, council agreed the budget of £50,000 for the poll. And we've come in, we think about 53,000, and nearly all of the additional rate is because of postal cost and increase in postal charges on the 1st of April. So I think we've done quite well in terms of our budget estimate there.
Thank you for that. Any comments from councillors? Councillor, I'm going to go around the table as I did last week because I think it's an easy way to do it. Councillor Nunn. Councillor Bremner.
I think obviously the non-binding poll is obviously in favour, as I am, of Parish Council for Market Harborough. We'll get on to the further discussions of the details that you want to share with us about how that's actually constructed. But I'd just like to thank everyone that voted, whichever way they did so, and hopefully we can move forward with it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Woodybus.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm delighted with the result, and I'd like to thank everyone who advocated for both sides of the argument. So I think it added clarity at the end of the day that the population has spoken. So very, very happy. Thank you.
Councillor Knowles.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, for me, this was a clear demonstration of democracy in action. I mean, we went out, we asked the question, and we got the answer. I think most of us would have predicted it was going to be very heavily in favour, but it was very, very important. I think the community engaged and engaged very heavily. They were very active in this, and I think now, obviously, it is something that is now in our gift to progress and move forward. So I think we have to discuss the next stages, but I'm absolutely delighted to see such an engagement by the community. I think it's, we owe them a great debt. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Bremner.
I'm not going to completely disagree with you, Councillor Knowles, but with a turnout of how much?
24.
24%. I think there's still some way to reach, if I may be so bold, the apathetic. And I think as this process goes on, I think we may need to look at our publicity for everything and see if there's anything that we've missed or anything that we can increase in terms of take up at the next poll, because there will be another poll and in this process. So if we get to a stage where we get to that poll,
I don't think there will be another poll on
yes,
this.
there is. I thought you said there was.
No, it'll be a consultation.
A consultation.
And then council
So
decide.
if there isn't a greater take up of that after all this, it's great that the public have spoken, and I don't disagree with it. But like in every election, turnout is disappointing.
I'm just going to make a comment on the turnout. I think when we look at the turnout in all local elections, I know it wasn't an election, but on all local matters, it's always in that kind of area of 25 to 30%. Lucky if we get to 30. So I think, but I think you're right. I think those who voted were very strong of the opinion. They did actually fight this quite hard in that sense, and they dominated social media. And there was a debate. It wasn't necessarily pleasant at times, but there was certainly a debate. But we will now take the matter in hand and do what needs to be done. So in that respect, do you want to make a comment?
I was just going to add, at your next meeting next week, we're going to bring forward proposals around what we do in second phase and how we reach out. If you've got ideas, we'd love to hear from you, but you can lead a horse to water sometimes. You can't always make them drink, but we can try every form of leading that we can.
So look, the next, yes, Councillor Knowles.
Thank you, Chair. I think it just needs a little further comment on this. I think that the problem is, as you said, local elections are always exceptionally low turnout. I think the thing that we have to appreciate is that everyone was given the opportunity to engage. Every single person who was of voting age could have voted. Now, what lessons we can learn from that, I don't know, Chairman, to be honest with you. And I think we have to look very carefully at where we're going to go. But like anything in life, it's always about the numbers. And if you're going to take on a fight on something, you need to make sure you've got the numbers. And very clearly, what's happened here with this is of those who engaged, the numbers are very clearly and heavily in favour. And I think we've got to underpin that, because, the thing is, if we go back, I know you and I have spoken about this, Paul, over the years, if you go back and ask again for another vote and another vote and another vote, I don't think you get much variance on the actual turnout. And you'll talk to people now in the town who will say to you, yes, I'm all in favour or whatever, or I'm against. And when you say, did you vote? You're going to find a significant number of people say, well, no, I didn't actually vote. So I don't think there is an answer to it. But the important thing is that democracy has been done and seen to be done. We've engaged with the community. We've gone out of our way at every opportunity. I do want to thank the officers for the huge amount of work that they've done on this. We've had some fairly heated debates at council about it as well. And I think we are where we are with it. But obviously, again, I have to say, you and I don't often agree on everything, Chairman, but I have to say on this one, I don't know what you can do that's going to alter it. I really don't know how on earth you can actually get more people to engage. But I think if anybody's got any ideas, that's great. But obviously on this one now, the poll's been conducted, the answers are in, and we take it from there. And now the next discussion is obviously going to be at full council when we ultimately get there.
The only thing I would say, and I don't know whether this adds cost to it, it probably does, but I think I'm really surprised today that we do a lot of our stuff digitally, but actually so much more is still on paper. And I was wondering whether whether we should put hangers on side the rubbish bins as part of the process for this, because it's the only thing where you know you're going to contact everybody who actually uses our services. Now, it's not to say that but it does. But I do think there needs to be opportunity to appeal to everybody, and I think that digital is easy, but it's not everybody's cup of tea. I met a number of people who didn't even know it was happening. I kind of thought, well, where have you been? How could you have avoided it? Really?
Poll card.
Your poll card, but still didn't realise. Yeah. So there is I agree. I think people were confused too, thinking it was possibly the elections. They know these elections are happening and thinking, oh, actually, hold on a minute. I'm going to do what I normally do. Don't vote. Don't trust any of them. I don't know whether that's what happened. We have another point on the agenda, which is to continue the discussion around the outcome of consultation, which we're kind of doing. But I think we want to move on now to probably look at the other area of the potential council size and warding options. But before I do that, I would like to officially say thank you to all the officers involved and to the council for their efforts. And I went and saw some of you, I think, on that night, and it was lovely to see you. And I know it's very quiet in some places, a little trickle maybe here and there, but I just want to say thank you for staying with the process. And as you say, Councillor Knowles, democracy was seen to be done. Okay. So at this point, I think because we're now going to look at the various maps of the wards, it would seem sensible that we turn off the live stream after consideration of the final agenda item.
I can do the presentation first.
Do you want to do that?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay then. Take the presentation first.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm just going to bring some content on the screen. We've sent you in advance a spreadsheet which shows some council size options of how many councillors there should be. I sort of 2 or 3 times started to sort of go through a bit of a report. Oh, it's come through very small. It's all right. When we're done the presentation, I'll bring it up on screen so it's a little bit bigger. But I like the idea. We sent you through some numbers, and 2 or 3 times I sort of tried to turn this into a form of report, but it wasn't quite coming off, because actually some of this is about looking at maps, and Joe and Sheena will be going through some things they've been doing to look at this in a bit.
I'm just wondering if that's larger than yours.
Yes.
Yeah. No, it's all right, don't worry. Sure, don't worry. Yes, I've been through it mine, using mine.
Yeah, sorry. But it's actually quite a technical process we'll enter as the second consultation. So just to warn you, if you're saying you're worried about level of engagement in the second phase of consultation tends to be a bit lower, because we're just going into the real nitty gritty on what a new parish council would mean. And the intention is to work with you over the next couple of meetings of, if council endorses in principle setting up a parish council, we then need to do that work on all the technical bits to feed into a final council resolution that will create the new council, and it will create how many councillors, how many wards, what those wards will be, all those additional details we'll need to come up with. And I can see Councillor Knowles is looking at me, so I'm happy to take questions during the presentation, Chair.
Councillor Knowles.
Thank you, Chair. Not wishing to lead the discussion, but I think one of the things that's very clear in this is that we're talking about volunteers, because that's what the parish and town councils are. They're volunteers. I'm certainly leaning towards, and I don't know whether it helps to say this right at the start, having looked at the figures, I think that we're looking at this figure of, is it 22 councillors in total, because there's going to be a big job to be done. And I think that we should be directing things in that way, because you've got more people involved in that, more opportunities. Now, I know I'm probably jumping the gun, but it might well take us down the pathway that we can concentrate on looking at that, because I think that's that sort of detail is the sort of thing we might want to start off and looking at.
I think we can note those comments.
Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Woodworth.
Sorry, yeah, talking about leading. Before we moved on, I don't know if this is part of this presentation, can we also go through the mechanism of if the council in the future wants to change the number of councillors, how that comes about, so we're actually aware of what the implications are?
Got you covered. If you don't mind, Chair, I
Carry
can go through. So we've got to make a decision in first, and it really helps, you'll see, when it comes to in terms of warding on how many councillors and a recommendation on this front, because we can consult on more than one option, not a problem, but we roughly need to know what you might be looking at. So when we're drawing up some options around what the ward should be, whether to keep with current, whether to divide them up a bit, how we divide those and how many councillors per ward. And that's the spreadsheet you've seen based on different numbers. Fundamentally, you need enough councillors to make sure people feel represented, to make sure they can feel they can approach their local councillors. And as Councillor Knowles just said, ultimately parish councils really are volunteers. So we don't want it to be an unreasonable burden on them. You also want to be able to have a healthy debate, lots of different views at parish council. At parish council level, you have committees. So generally they'll have usually an events, a community services, a planning, an employment, one finance and audit. So enough to cover those, and ensure there's enough to help events when they're taking place, because usually they get caught up into helping out a bit here and there whenever there's events in the community. But on the other hand, too many can mean that people don't feel able to contribute. And there's two other factors. I put one here. So what we generally see is when new parishes are established, loads of people want to come forward to be on it. But give it 2 or 3 rounds of elections and it can be really difficult to secure candidates. And so if you go in with too many at first, it can be problematic in the long term. And it's surprising the number of councils that actually want to reduce the number of councillors because they can't get enough volunteers. I think as well, one of the factors I've been thinking about is Market Harbour is set to grow. We've got 3 strategic development sites in the local plan. I mean, local plan hasn't yet been approved, so I always caveat that. If you go in with too many, you've essentially got not much room to go. Because either you've then got to keep the same number of councillors and they represent more people, or you're getting up to sort of, you know, if you go with 22 now, you'll be getting up to 25, which puts you at the same size as Northampton Town Council. That is the biggest size of council you're allowed. So it's just worth holding on to those balancing factors. There is no right number. So there was some guidance issued in 1988, which suggests that Market Harbour size, you'd have about 24, but comes with some heavy caveats. That would put you at the 2nd largest council and one of the largest councils in terms of number of councillors in the country. The Mount Guidance has a bit of a bell curve factor to it. There's lots of parish councils that are sort of in the sort of 500 to 1500 population level, and it works really well for them as sort of having 5, 7, 9 councillors. It doesn't work so well for more recent councils that have been created that, you know, have more than 20,000 plus, because it sort of basically says, well, you should all have about 23 to 25 councillors, and that's quite a lot. Most of the councils have done a bit of research, we've all done a bit of research looking at similar sizes, and it's usually about the 16 to 20. And I've mentioned that point about lower number may give room for growth.
So just to clarify, is that guidance on the 25 statutory or?
The statutory guidance references it. So I would take it as such, and I don't believe any have been made bigger than 25. Northampton's the biggest parish council in the country, and it's got 25.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, go on.
Now, I've also mentioned warding, and there is an inherent link between size and warding, because if you divide your council into wards, then you've got to look at what the number of councillors means per ward as well. Now, it is common that larger parishes are divided into wards. If we didn't divide it into wards, it would be a significant exception. It'd be outside the normal. And we're already warded at district level, so why wouldn't you have a warding at parish? It makes sure we've got representatives at most local level. And one of the other things we're just bearing in mind at a very practical level, if you don't ward it, every time there's a vacancy in the parish and an election's called, it would cost the parish council £53,000 for a by-election, one councillor. So that's not really practical. I'll give a comparative. I live in a town council area that's going through some difficulties at the moment. It only has 2 wards. Each ward has about 8,000 voters. We've had 5 by-elections in the past year. And our council tax has gone up astronomically to cover the cost of this. So it's important that we don't make the ward so big when there's a by-election, it costs everyone significantly. Not that democracy should have a price, but in practice it sometimes does. So if we've got a preferred council size, it really helps us then shape what the warding pattern should be. And you'll see before you, when we've looked at some options, in some areas, if we've got 14, 16, 18, as the size of the council goes up, the number of wards would potentially go up if we're using the district as building blocks. There's 2 key factors we have to consider when we make wards. So we look at what's right for community governance, what makes sense in terms of putting bits together. And we're also trying to achieve electoral equality. And what we mean by that is each councillor represents the same number of electors, roughly. You try and get it within plus or minus 10% if you can. It's not always absolutely possible, but that's what you're trying to work towards. And actually, when the Local Government Boundary Commission do their work to look at districts and counties, they do that plus or minus 10%. So we already know our district wards, if we use those as a building block, are roughly good levels of equality. We've just got to be a little bit careful because Great Baldon and Arden and Lubenham, the district wards are equal, but the bits for Arden, bits for West Polling District, as we call it at the moment, are partly district ward and partly not. So they're not quite in the same position. So this is where it really starts to get into a bit more technical. So whenever 2 local government boundaries collide, that creates a polling district. So I've just given a simple example here. If you had a district ward that overlaps a county division, in a simple Venn diagram, 3 polling districts emerge. And I'll come on to explain why that's important. So in a moment, I'm just going to go over a little bit. So the county and district boundaries can be really useful building blocks because we've already got that base of what they're trying to achieve. We understand at the moment it's more likely that the county divisions will be used under local government reorganisation. So I'd say it's sensible to look at district boundaries as a basis, but they don't have to be absolute, because ultimately, if we had some parish boundaries that crossed the district, for one election, there would be additional polling districts, but then a future review could get rid of those additional polling districts and it revert back to one. I'll show you that in a moment. But if we have too many polling districts, it can cause confusion because, for example, if you have people that are living on a different street in the same street but in a different polling district and there's flooding, that's 2 different sets of councillors they're dealing with, where, rather than talking to one individual. So it can sometimes cause a bit of confusion about who's my councillor and who represents me. The other factor is, as far as possible, you should try and ensure that within a polling district, there's a place for people to vote in it. So you might be aware in Logan, as we'll come on to show you at the moment, we cannot find a place for people to vote within Logan Ward, and they have to vote out of ward. So we're trying to look at that through this review as well. But as far as possible, you want to always try and ensure that. So when we're dividing things up and creating parish boundaries across district boundaries at the moment, what that means is creating new polling districts and trying to find a place that people can vote in that new polling district. And if you do that, people can get a bit confused because they get very used to going to the same polling station every time. And then suddenly you say, actually, you're not voting here anymore. I particularly enjoyed it on Thursday, where I had a gentleman downstairs and I was just doing the inspector job downstairs when he turned up. And he was like, well, my next door neighbours told me I've got to go to the Congregational Church, whereas I always vote here. And we're like, no, it's fine. You always vote here. But people can get easily confused if you do mess them about. And we don't want to cause problems for democratic engagement. So this is what I'd see as a perfect solution. So if you had blue line being one county division, and that county division is divided up into 2 district wards. So one district ward is my big red bubble there, and the other district ward is the other part of the bubble, the crescent underneath it. And then you might say, okay, let's divide that up into 2 parish wards, areas 1, 2, 3, 4. So all 4 parish wards would have the same county councillor. Area 1 and 2 have the same district councillor. Area 3 and 4 have the same district councillors, but they all have separate parish councillors. So that would be perfect. We just divide everything up, equal, good electoral equality, all great. And ultimately, LGR happens, they could remove the district boundaries, we could keep the polling districts as they are. World isn't always perfect. So I mentioned earlier about county divisions would be the building blocks. We could, if we wanted to, have for one election some additional polling districts that crossed district boundaries. And then post LGR, the new unitary authority would undertake a polling district review. And where a district caused 2 polling districts, if a district ward caused 2 polling districts to emerge, as this diagram shows, district ward boundary crosses through a parish, they, under a polling district review, they'd say, actually, let's merge polling districts 1 and 2 because the red line no longer exists. So you just reverse out some of the problems you created before. So it might be a problem just for one election if we crossed district boundaries. So I realise that's quite a lot to take in, but it becomes a little bit simpler when you start looking at maps, because we can start to then show you what we've got at present, what we could do, depending on council size, and then some options that you might want us to look at as well. But initially, it'd be really helpful for us today as well if we got some views from you on what you might want us to look at in terms of council size and the number of councillors.
Actually, would you like to comment, Councillor Nunn? I can feel it coming.
Yeah, I mean, my initial thoughts behind this was that we should actually look at going with the lowest number of councillors that's contained within this document. That's 14.
That's 14, isn't it?
Because I then feel that, you know, to begin with, we might decide to transfer minimal services across to the parish. We don't know what the level of input to the parish is going to be at that time. And we don't know how their line of thought is going to go going forward about what they may or may not want to take on. So, and like what Leah said about the growth of the town as well, it does allow room for expansion of the number of parish councillors based on the growth of the town and any growth that the parish may wish to take on themselves.
Thank you, Councillor Nunn. Councillor Woodibus?
Yeah, unsurprisingly, I take an opposite view almost. I take an opposite view to you almost. I was certainly with Councillor Knowles towards the top. We look on the councillors that we're going to be electing to this town to be our, shall we say, our capacity for doing things. We've already outlined there'll be roughly 4 or 5 committees, and it becomes a case of the usual suspects if you don't have enough people on the council. And then obviously the aspirations of the people we'll be electing in this first election as well. So I feel that to go too low will reduce the capacity, and obviously we've been warned about going too high. So my feeling would be in the 20 maybe for this, but that's my thoughts.
Okay. Councillor Knowles? I think we know where you're coming from already, don't we?
Yeah. I think the problem we've got, Chairman, and it is a difficult one, is that we're all sitting around this table waiting to know what the Magistrates government in Westminster is going to do with the local government reorganisation. Now, I don't care whether you're a Conservative, Labour, Lib Dem, Green, or Reform, or whoever. Everyone you speak to has got a different opinion on what they're going to come out with, and that is going to directly impact where we go with this. And I think that's a statement of fact. It's going to be very difficult, and we're trying to second guess it. But I think that for me, what we've got to try and do is we've got to try and make sure we take the opportunity now to give the maximum flexibility that we can. that's why I said initially the top end of this, because I'm worried if we go on the bottom end of it, no disrespect to Councillor Nunn, if we go on the bottom end of it, we're not going to have the numbers or the flexibility. Then we're going to be pushing on to the new town council or parish council, whatever it's called, to be looking at, you know, adapting numbers, changing numbers. And we're also in a situation where we don't honestly know what is going to be pushed across to the new town and parish council, because again, this is all in the realms of, you know, Narnia and whatever's going to happen with Westminster government. None of us know. So we're trying, if you like, I suppose, to sort of crystal ball gaze quite a considerable amount on this. So, but I think we should err very much on the top end of this to make sure we're giving maximum capacity, because if we don't, I think it's a real danger that we're going to be putting the new council, when it comes in, they're going to be a real difficulty. They're going to have both arms up their back trying to sort this all out. At least with an added number of people there, Chairman, they're going to have the opportunity of saying, well, you know, at least we've got the numbers and the flexibility to be able to take on the workload and decide what we do. I mean, that's where I am with it. You know, I think whether it's the absolute top one of 22 or whatever it was, or the one below it, which was what, 20, 18, 20. That's you know, I'm thinking it's got to be towards that top end for me, because otherwise, bottom end, I think we're making trouble for the new council by sheer dint of the workload.
Okay.
Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor.
Thank you. I'm not looking at the total number. I'm looking at the number of councillors per ward or polling district. And I feel that the top end is almost too many. And sometimes when you get, I understand there might be a lot to do, and but when sometimes you get a lot of people together, there can be factions and disagreements as well. That could happen with 14, I guess. But in just terms of numbers of representation per ward, and thinking of the volunteers, I'm more around about 16, 17. And I also wonder, because 17 is the only one that's an odd number, if you're having votes, is that the best one to go with?
Do you want to comment on that, Leah?
So I mentioned there's two key factors we have to consider when warding. One is community governance and one is electoral equality. Now, there's a reason I picked 22 at the top end, because 22 is a tipping point for what we're referring to as Wellington Place to have 2 councillors. And it is what I can best describe as a bit of a disaster for electoral equality at 22. We would basically have to rebuild the wards. We could not use the existing district wards as a building block, because the residents of Wellington Place would be massively overrepresented. In Welland, they would be massively underrepresented, and the same in Little Bowden at 22. Now, we've partly used the 16, 17, 18 to take you on a bit of a journey. So as you get more, and Wellington Place is our big issue, as we get more and more councillors at that point, Wellington Place starts to become more and more underrepresented. So at 16, it's 17% underrepresented. You could possibly live with that. But then you're talking about 24, then 32. You get to 20, and they are going to be about 60% underrepresented. And then it's that tipping point where they then become massively overrepresented. 16 works very nicely. Now, we have been looking at some options around the top of Welland Ward and Wellington Place, which we can present to you when we look at the maps.
Any more comments from you, Councillor Brennan?
From what Leah just shared, and the balance across electorally across the wards, I think you're definitely not at 22 on that basis. And I think you're more falling within the 16, 17. And then I guess you make a decision which one you fall on. I mean, I know they're at one end, she's at the other end, I'm in the middle. But I think in the middle is backing up what Leah's just spoken about.
I'm actually.
So I think, no, it's what the evidence from the officer and the balance of electoral representation and disrepresentation is clear at 22. So you're looking at another option. And I think for me, to have 3 or 2, 5, 5, 1, bearing in mind that Logan at the moment has 2 district councillors, to have 3 volunteers seems like a good number because they can work together on that. And they can also work together, not necessarily have an agreement because they're 3. So I'm there.
Councillor Nunn?
Following on the comments that have been said, actually, I'm coming more towards the middle of the pack.
So I haven't said anything yet, but my view was to keep it simple as much as possible in that first year, as much as we can, and to keep it fair as we can, keep it simple, keep it fair, and keep the cost down. But at the same time, I actually am lending myself to that balance that you've achieved in the middle somewhere, because I think it's excessive at 22 councillors, 60% over representation in Wellington Place. I'm a resident there, I'd be more than happy to stand and have a friend of mine stand as well. But no, I'm joking. But I mean, in all honesty, I think if we keep it simple and try to keep within the boundaries that we currently have, that would be my preference. But anyway, let's have a look at the maps and see where we go. If there are any other comments, Leah?
I mean, what we could do is have a look at the maps and then just revisit for a recommendation, if you like.
Yeah, by all means. Okay, so if we're all in agreement, then we're going to go now into end the live streaming. If there's no other business, we're going to end the live streaming because I think it's going to involve us all going over there and looking at the maps. So it seems a sensible thing to do. So, yes,